Yeah. How do you belong when you know you don't belong, right? So this is really, really hard, and there's no magic bullet to this, but I'm going to tell you, you can't be someone you're not, because that will always undermine you. There's been lots of opportunities in the work that I do and the experiences that I've had where I did not belong and I didn't want to be there. In my professional life, there's opportunities where there's gatherings, where there's alcohol, there's camaraderie that I'm not comfortable engaging with. And you know, I have to make a choice. And what I've learned, and again, I'm a lot older than you, and it's easy for me to say this. And so I say this with a great amount of grace for you, is that hold on to your values, because you just can't be who you are later. Like, you have to be who you are. When you say, I don't drink, I won't be able to come to that place, eventually people come around and respect you for that. Stay close to your values. And if you're not invited to all the parties, it's okay. They're not that much fun. Go to the parties where you do belong. Stay there. That's what will fill you. You are who you are. Stay strong to your values. I always have, and you know what? In the end, it will make you whole. But I know it's hard. You can always come to my house.
I have a question, and maybe if we can get everybody to answer this one. As a Muslim woman leader, or as a woman leader, what characteristics do you lean on when you need to make tough choices, or when you're feeling like life is difficult, work is difficult? What characteristics do you tap into in order to get through and push through? I'm very curious about that.
Okay. This is a very good question, and I will keep my answer short on this, but being part of the community and having receiving the opportunity of leading different projects, programs, and growing from there, the journey is never an easy one. We have bumps along the road, but the way we overcome obstacles and challenges, whether it's on an operational side, or leaders need mentors as well. So personally, I would go to the other leaders in the community, or to anyone I see as mentors, and go and seek their advice, their guidance. And leaders are not supposed to know everything. We need guidance too. And I appreciate that I have very strong women around me that I've been, and some of you are in the room right now, where I would definitely give a call or a message and ask for their advice and proceed from there. Because it matters for me to learn from those who have experienced, or to just double check my decision before taking it forward.
Thank you. That's very good. I echo what Tanweer said. For me personally, I do look at my values, my faith, and I also look at my daughter. So I'm doing this because I want to have that characteristic that my daughter can look up to. So that's what my main characteristic that I go to all the time.
All right, the values that I tap into when it comes to leadership is just having a confidence in yourself, having a confidence in your skills and your belief system. So if you know something that's being done is wrong, then you just have the courage to stand up, have the courage to speak. And again, look for look for your coalitions, like look for people who are going to stand with you, because it makes you stronger when there is someone else standing right beside you. But if you're in the war or in this fight on your own, just have the confidence that you can do it by yourself as well.
I think for me, on days when I feel like things are getting really tough, I remind myself first and foremost, we are the Ummah, we are the community of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his progeny. We are a resilient community. We are a community that thrives on knowing that our leader, the Holy Prophet, is someone who went through immense hardship. He stood alone at times. He was forcefully pushed out of his homeland, out of his city. There are times when leadership failed him, that they were cunning towards him. He's been through everything. If we read about the life and the history of the Holy Prophet, there are so many parallels in the challenges and difficulties that we face today. And so I think for me, that's my North Star. I look to examples that he went through and how he came out of those difficult circumstances. And then one particular thing that I take away from his story is to excel at everything that you try to do. Try your absolute best to excel. When you excel at what you do, when you enter into institutions that are immediately judging you, that cast a sort of decision about who you are before you've even entered those rooms, when you step forward and you excel at what you do, it becomes very hard to dismiss your voice. And so you create a strength within yourself to move forward, knowing that that's your responsibility. And then those kinds of circumstances that you're placed in will also respond accordingly, to recognize that they may not like who you are, they may not like your values, but you are indispensable. And so I think that's something that really pushes me forward.
Everyone said such great things. I echo what everyone here has said. I think I would just add to that. Number one is realize that your experience to date, to that moment that you're coming to that decision, your experience has prepared you for that decision. There is a reason you're in that moment. So it's really think about what preceded it. What have you learned on the journey that you can now use? So basically imagine your life as a journey and you're constantly putting tools into your bag. So when you're in front of that decision, what are the tools that you have built over time to bring to that moment? Among the tools will be what was said, your allies. Think about who are your allies, who are the people that have been either with you or who you know are out there who care about the common good, and lean on them for advice, lean on them for support. And then the last thing I would say is be ready to shift your path. So if you've come to a decision point and it's very difficult and you're wondering if I take this decision or that decision, there could be very serious consequences, be ready for those consequences. Be ready that it may mean your life is going to change dramatically. But as long as you are true, and I think it was said earlier, to your North Star, to your values, that's okay. And as long as you're clear on your intention, whatever journey shifts, you're going to go with it and continue to collect your tools, collect your resources for the next big decision. So the question, for those who may not have heard it, was what are the lessons we learned for those of us who remember post 9/11, a time where Muslims were being blamed for the actions of terrorists, actions we had nothing to do with, actions that we were constantly expected to condemn, as though we had to tell people that we were against the killing of innocent people. Of course we are against the killing of innocent people. To ask me that question is Islamophobic, yet we were asked all the time. Nevertheless, what I will say, I'm just going to go to my own experience. So I just graduated from journalism school when 9/11 happened. and I was working at the CBC in Ottawa as a new journalist. And at the time, what I saw, our communities were struggling, of course, to deal with all of this racial profiling that we were experiencing, to deal with the hate crimes that were going up, to deal with this. So when I think back, what was positive? What did we learn in that time? Many lessons, but I'll kind of focus on two. Number one, the courage of being open to explain and teach and educate people about Islam, even though many of the questions were Islamophobic and insulting, for those of us who, really believe that Islam is peaceful and it's a universal values that are reflected in all of the great faith traditions. It felt hard to have to constantly answer those questions, but it was important. And so there was an openness that our communities, we opened up our mosques, there were open houses. Those of you who will remember, we invited our neighbors to come in because we recognized that people really did have questions. One of the stories that I did for the CBC, over the month or so after 9/11, all of the stores in Ottawa, bookstores, were sold out of the Quran. All of them. Because people were thinking, what is it in the Quran that would, inspire? Of course, there's nothing. It was a misinterpretation. These are people who twisted the understanding of our beautiful faith, and that was the case. But there was so many questions. People wanted to know. So it was our responsibility to step up and respond to those questions. So being open. And then the second thing that I saw happen widely was a real self-education of our communities about our civil liberties, about our human rights. So I think Laya was talking about that, for students on campuses, know your rights. We need to do that again now. So in the post-October 7th environment where, peaceful demonstrators, the vast majority of the demonstrations that have been happening across this country, and I think the Vancouver police can attest to this because other police services I've talked to have attested to this, the vast majority of these demonstrations are peaceful, they are not anti-Semitic, they are all about human rights, they are find people of all walks of life, not just Muslims, not just Palestinians, not just Arabs, but people, Canadians of all backgrounds who are enraged at what they are seeing on their screens, what they are seeing in terms of the war that has been brought down on the heads of innocent civilians in Gaza and in the West Bank and now in Lebanon, and they are angry and they want to demonstrate that human rights should be for everyone. So knowing your right, that you have the right to do that. You have the right. And again, we need to know those rights now in this moment. And it is important to say, however, that we must condemn anti-Semitism wherever we see it. We must condemn any form of hate whenever we see it. We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility because otherwise people will assume that we are complacent, that we are supportive of hate. We are not. Our faith teaches us that we speak out against injustice wherever it is, even if it's against our own selves. So I think it's important that we lean into these learnings post 9/11 into this moment. And I said two things, but I'll just add for our young people. I'm really concerned about how our young people are doing. We worked so hard post 9/11 to ensure that they never had to have their belonging questioned. And I think there's a lot of young people who are really upset and hurt as to the way they're being treated in schools, universities, and workplaces. So for us, for women, we need to continue to hold our young people up and create space for them to talk about what they're going through.
Thank you. I don't know if this mic is working. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? No? I'll project my voice again.
Do you want me to pass this back?
No, so since Laya has
Okay.
I have a question for you, and I'll take the question from the audience after this. You talked about this idea of having unfiltered conversations in university setting, and having, you said, you called it freedom to make unfiltered conversations, and I'm wondering about how do you deal with a culture that has the cancel culture, where speaking openly and in an unfiltered way can be seen as either offensive or not appropriate, and in that, as Muslim women demanding things that might not be in line with social norms, our voice gets silenced. And so how do we navigate through that? How do we balance between having those honest, unfiltered conversations in a society that is really rampant with cancel culture?
Thank you, Fatma. That's a really good question. I think that's a question that a lot of public institutions are grappling with. I don't know if there's a straight up answer for it, but I think from my experience, being involved with the administration in whatever way that you have capacity, whether, as I mentioned, it's on Senate, you're in a volunteer position on Senate, you're in a volunteer position at the Board of Governors, you run a student club, you're part of any student club on campus, those are all ways in which you can be heard. You can start to collect some of the information from your communities and use those platforms to share those sentiments, those experiences. Oftentimes at Senate and Board of Governors, there's virtually no Muslim voices present, and so they don't understand the experiences. They don't often hear about them. And when they do, it's through a filter, it's through actually many filters that have finally reached them. So it's a very different version of the experiences that we feel. So my first hope and my plea is for students to get involved in those types of opportunities, but to also know your responsibilities. You have a responsibility to be respectful. You have a responsibility to not veer into hate speech. Yes, I promote, even in my own classroom spaces, in any of the circles that I'm in a position of leadership, that we can have unfiltered conversations, but unfiltered is different from veering off into hate speech. It is different from being disrespectful. By being unfiltered, I mean to talk about the difficult experiences that you are facing. Seek out administrative support, put a request for budgets to support those kinds of conversations. Write to your administrators and request counselors for your identity-based type counseling. So if you feel you need a counselor that understands your needs, make those requests. Go to your multi-faith centers and let them know what your expectations are. But by staying quiet and not having those kinds of conversations, there's almost no hope for change. So again, my plea is to get as involved as you can. Lean on those of us who understand these institutions. I've been at my institution for 22 years. I understand how the systems of governance, the structures, the politics, where the barriers are. There are many of us who are more than happy to lead in and help you in those, navigate these difficult circumstances and these complex systems. But we don't know what the requests are. We don't know what your needs are. So the request is to please come to us and use those of us in the community that do know how to manage them.
Thank you so much. Any questions from the audience? Okay, one back.
Tanweer, yeah, maybe Tanweer. Anybody has?
Do you mean within Muslim organizations? So how does a Muslim woman in a Muslim organization be able to be represented fully? Yeah. So I've been there lots. And what you do is you keep showing up, and you keep showing up, and you keep showing up. And there'll be times when they don't want you to. And it's hard to say because I'm saying this within my own community. But, you know, gender bias exists within all systems, and even within our own community, even though it's not something that is in any way supported in our faith. We know, as I've said, that the prophet was only able to do the work because of the women around him. We know that in history. He spoke of that, right? So show up. That's all I can say. And it's hard. It's really, really hard because they're not prepared to listen to you. But you have good questions, and you ask those questions, and you have good ideas. You present those. And it may feel like you're not being heard, but trust me, some of those ideas will come out of somebody else's mouth and they will happen. And sometimes you have to just sit in that space that you know, your intention was to make that happen. It wasn't necessarily that you needed the accolades that happened because you said it. And that's where your work will become your intention, and you will find your place eventually. But show up and know you belong.
We can take one more question. Okay. Oh, two. We'll take both questions, but the answers, if you can shorten them so we can fit another question in there, okay?
No, you go ahead. Okay, when it comes to encouraging our youth, I think it all goes back to education. You know, sometimes our youth is seeing certain things that are happening in because they're easily persuaded by social media. And social media, as we all know, it never portrays a true picture. It's always bits and pieces that are presented depending on what the message is that they want to portray. So I always say, even when you see any police little clips in the media that, oh, police did this, know what happened before that, know what happened after that. So this is something that we need to teach our youth, is like, hey, if you want to, you need to know the full story, learn the full story, and then see what are your steps, what are your rights. Again, going back to knowing your rights, I think talked about the school system. And ask those questions, and ask those hard questions, because not until you ask them, there's not going to be any change made, or no one's going to feel compelled to answer. Again, we're not politics where we can beat around the bush and not give you the right answer. We have to show that, okay, we have this agenda, these are our goals, and we need to meet all our goals and objectives that we have set out.
Sorry, I just wanted to add one thing to that is, engage your local government, whether it be police or whomever, with the youth in your community. I think it's very important so that there is a face. There is a person behind whatever is representing. That's very important. Somebody that you can reach out to, talk to. It's just not a group. They're real people that are affected on any level and in any group. Even within policing, it's very hard to know when we want to engage groups that don't want us there, but we want to be there. We want to be able to help, and vice versa. We hope other people engage with us.
Okay, so I just want to say, I think it's a great question. First of all, we have to understand that trust in institutions are on the decline, generally, across the world and here in Canada. So people really don't trust many of these institutions. That being said, there's one saying I'm going to share with you. I didn't come up with it, but it's very valuable. If you're not at the table, chances are you're on the menu. So what does that mean? It means that regardless of how much we feel let down by institutions, rightfully or maybe through misinformation, whatever, the reality is we still have to be there. We still have to be there. We still have to engage. So the homework for this room is that here in Vancouver or Surrey or wherever you're coming from, ask yourself, who in our communities is engaging on a regular basis with the schools, with the local media, with the police, with local healthcare, and the local officials, the elected officials? Who is building the relationship with these folks. Because if you're only showing up when there's a crisis, when there's a problem, and they only hear from our communities once a year, or when something's gone wrong, or when they've done something terrible, it's going to be very, very difficult to fix it. But if we are constantly engaging, we know people on a first name basis, we go to coffee with them, we get to know them, we are building, this is community building. So whether we like it or not, these are the folks who are in power. They're the ones who make decisions that impact on our lives and our families' lives. And it's a responsibility for us to be engaged. And the reality is, many of our communities are simply not there. So this is something as women that we really need to drive. And if it's not you, then donate to an organization or support an organization that is committed to doing that. Do something to make sure that these relationships are being built and nurtured and fostered.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just going to add one more thing to that. It's like, and again, the organization that is in question, just ask them what programs do they have. Maybe they haven't done a good job of being proactive out in the community, letting the community know what programs are available to address certain situations, certain problems. So ask those questions, ask them what programs are there. I know Vancouver Police, we have tons of great programs, and when I go to community forums or I'm asked a lot of questions, people are outraged, oh, you're not doing this, you're not doing this, and then I start listing the programs that we have, how much of outreach programs that we have in place in Vancouver, they're surprised. Again, it's lack of communication, lack of knowledge, and police needs to do a better job at being proactive and informing the community that we are engaging in this work. And same with any other organization, so just ask questions.
Thank you. Just before I move on, it's very interesting for me that the person who asked the question, Sister Haiqa, is actually in government. So she is proof enough that Muslims are in government, they're doing the work, they are engaged. It's also the responsibility of institutions to make room for us to be at the table, because it's a two-way street. If we're showing up and we're ready to be at the table, there needs to be room for us made at the table, and there has to be representation so our voice can be heard. So I did want to just highlight that. I apologize. I do want to take this last question here because she put her... Your question was answered? Oh, okay, well, thank you so much. I'll take this question then. Okay. Yes.
How do you handle when harassment is posed and caused by the officials?
Yeah.
In this instance, police officers.
Yeah.
Did you want to take that one?
Reporting that the municipality, I think that's an important point that for everybody it's crucial to know, and to also share it with the youth and those who may experience it.
I'm just going to let Sarah answer this one because she is the district commander, so she's better prepared to answer this one.
So the question was how, if a police officer has done something that you would like to make a complaint about, how do you go about that process? Essentially, it depends on you, what you would like to see. But officially, you can come to the front counter of any police station. If you don't want to do that and don't feel comfortable coming to a police station, there's a website, opcc.ca. So that's the Office of the Police Complaints Commissioner. And they're based out of Victoria, but you can go online and make an online complaint, or you can call them, and it's toll-free as well. So you make a... you let them know what the issue was, and they are a separate body to policing, so no police officers have anything to do with that. They receive, and then they decide whether it's called admissible or not, so meaning, is it going to be a complaint that we recognize as being something that needs to be investigated? And then it is investigated, and you are asked to be a witness, whether that's through a verbal statement, a written statement, depends on your comfort level, where you are physically, your location, and then the investigation is completely done by police. The oversight throughout it all is through the Office of the Police Complaints Commissioner. So they oversee every step that it goes through, and I won't go into details because the process can be anywhere from 6 months to years, depending on what the complaint is. But just know that it is followed by a government body that has nothing to do with the police throughout that process. In the end, there is, depending on what complaint and what we call it, a misconduct is found, so that could be like a neglect of duty. So somebody has not written a report that they should have written, or they use of force. So they used too much force, they didn't use enough force. All of those dictate what the eventual, we call it substantiation, guilty, not guilty, and what the potential discipline can be. So that's a basic, but throughout it as well, you are supported. There are supports, again, in place for anybody who needs to call in any type of complaint.
Thank you. Yeah,
Oh, yes. And there, at the same time, those can also become a human rights complaint, a part of that process. We have different, it sort of tears off a little bit depending on what the complaint is about. But yes, it can go through a variety of different options, and one of them is the human rights. Absolutely.
This and response to Sister Haiqa. So our community, Muslim community, is very diverse. One thing we lack is a unified voice, a collective voice. We lack that so much, and we need that. We have so many different sects in Islam and different groups, but we don't have a unified voice. We're all one. It's going to attack this, minority, it'll come to another minority. We also have to make allies with other communities in order to combat any racism. We have to be very frank. Racism, systemic racism, is ingrained in this society. I myself, I have children. I sometimes get scared to go to a protest because I don't want somebody taking my picture and being in social media. Somebody might misrepresent it for something else. So there's a big issue here, but we need to lobby and we need to have a collective voice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What a beautiful way to end the program. Thank you for that message. I want to thank all the speakers for taking the time to join us here today, for sharing your wisdom, your experiences with us. I'm sure, I learned a lot, and I'm sure our audience has also learned a lot. I want to thank the audience for coming and for supporting this program. We hope that we can have more programs like this where we can engage in conversation about issues that really impact us. We do have gifts for all the presenters, and I want to ask Sister Aisha and Sister Sumaya to come up and hand the gifts. She's the kid. Which one?
We'll start with Amira.
They're just in the back.
Is there one with that?
So there are names in the cards. So if you get the wrong gifts, just kind of exchange them. Oh, it says no. Oh, it says on the bottom. So this is Sister Amira.
Okay, we'll just do this at the end.
Okay. Okay.
We'll just give
Yes,
this.
I want to take that.
Okay, we'll switch this order out. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I'd like to conclude the event. As we conclude the event, I want to hold space together to recognize that each of us has a unique position in society. Some of us yield more power than others, and it is in these times of heightened Islamophobia and Islamophobic narratives that we look to leaders for guidance. I encourage each of us and challenge us to think about what role we play in making space for Muslim women, amplifying their voices and advocating for their right to live with dignity, a life where they're not surviving but are flourishing and growing without any barriers. We've come far as Muslim women, but we have more work to do. Let's view today not just as a moment in time, but a catalyst for ongoing change. The insights shared today can spark meaningful change, and I encourage each of us to take these discussions into our communities and continue the conversations. Let's advocate for policy changes, support one another in our leadership journeys, and engage in open dialogue that promotes understanding and inclusivity. Together, we have the power to change Islamophobia and empower Muslim women to lead with confidence and strength. Before I close the event, I want to take a moment and remember all the women whose lives were lost in Palestine, Lebanon, and around the world as they stood up against injustice. Let's honor their resilience, courage, and sacrifice by reciting a Surah Al-Fatiha for their blessed souls. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. Now I invite you all to join us for networking. I know it's getting late, we went over time, but if you'd like to stay around and network and speak to each other and speak to our panelists who, if they're staying back, you're welcome to do that. This has been a wonderful opportunity to connect with all of you. Thank you once again for being here today. Let's keep the momentum going. هذا وصلى الله على خير خلقه محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Thank you.